Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your host, Miracle Jones. I want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We know many of you are still probably recuperating from last week. We finally had our primary elections here in Pennsylvania, and so I know people are getting rest. But we also want to give love to Georgia and Texas, as we know a whole host of states have their primary elections this week. And so there's a lot of stuff happening now that the election's over, almost. What does it mean? What is it? We're doing this like counting for the Senate and the governor's race. What does this mean for Pennsylvania? What does this mean for November elections going on to a contested? What are some of the next steps that's going to happen with our elections? And some of the things that we're here to talk with you about this evening. And we have some cool events happening this week and this weekend that we want to let you know about. So we're going to have a conversation with Terrance from Project Matters about a really cool rally he's doing tomorrow. We'll also talk about an event that we're doing. But to get the reason why we're here, it has been an election season. This has been one of the most competitive and one of the most expensive elections in Pennsylvania history, and we're just at the primary. And so, as you may have known, here in southwestern Pennsylvania, a lot of people won for the first time, making a lot of historical voting outcomes. Of course, a lot of people are talking about Summerlee, win for Congress and PA 12. But in addition, you had Emily Kincaid, and other women from southwestern Pennsylvania win their nomination despite not being the endorsed Democratic nominee. So here in southwestern Pennsylvania, there has been an ongoing conversation about what does it mean to be endorsed? What does it mean to run under a party platform? If you cannot get the endorsement of your local political committee. And this week, majority of the women who won were not endorsed here in southwestern Pennsylvania. That's an ongoing conversation. In addition, we know a lot of people are still reeling from what happened last week in Buffalo with the hate crime violence, and still trying to have a conversation about how do we keep each other safe? How do we keep us safe? We know here in Pittsburgh, there's an ongoing conversation due to the amount of situations that's happened. Even here, we've had police officers say they're going to go back to an old style of policing, creating the first kind of conflict between the mayor's office and the city of Pittsburgh police, and how they are going to engage conversations around public safety, around health and safety, and to reduce gun violence, which of course is an ongoing conversation and a national conversation, as even Joe Biden, who is the president, has stepped in and said that states who have not used their COVID-19 funding should actually take that funding and use it to support, local police, expanding police, and buying various equipment for police municipalities. So there's a lot of things happening as well. Another situation here in Pennsylvania, particularly in Pittsburgh, that is causing some concern is the announcement that the Universal Basic Income pilot is currently on hold. As you remember, last year, it was announced that Pittsburgh was going to be a satellite city and that there was going to be a minimum of $500 distributed to see how a universal basic income would impact people's lives. However, that policy is right now on hold. Why? Well, for a plethora of reasons. One being there was a mounting legal challenge arguing that identifying Black women who were going to be the bulk of the recipients for the universal basic income was going to be a violation of constitutional law because it was factoring in race as a determining factor on who gets to be selected for the program even before the program came to fruition. And so that program right now again is just on hold, and we're still waiting for the mayor's office to talk about what the next iterations are going to be, or have city council come and talk about what their next steps is in this specific situation. Additionally, we know the Learn and Earn program has launched. So if you have a youth, um, a guardian, a parent of a youth, make sure you're applying to the Pittsburgh Summer Earn and Learn program. This is a wonderful opportunity for young people to get paid during the summer. A lot of conversations are happening right now around youth violence, around youth education, youth education loss, as we're still even waiting in Pennsylvania about our education funding lawsuit. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now when it pertains to the youth, and we know that they are severely, under surveillance and over policed. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for our youth who is under the age of 25 to participate in some youth hiring programs that allow youth to work not only throughout the city, but at different nonprofits or organizations to get workable skills, real life experience to put on resumes, and find mentorship this summer to hopefully keep them as safe as possible. And as we wrap up of current events, we also want to remind people that this election season is still ongoing. I know folks are still trying to take a breather, but the primary last week was only for Republicans and Democrats, and so now your independent parties are going to start to run ballots, signatures to get onto the ballot. So you look to see people, if you are registered as an independent, people will be reaching out to you to sign their ballots so they can be on the ballot in November. So again, I know people are trying to rest up and wait for the Labor Day launch of getting out the vote. But before that happens, you still need to remember that those who are like your third parties, your Working Families Party, your Independent, your Libertarian, your Green Party, they're going to be starting to gather signatures so they can get on the ballot. And we know there are a multitude of races where independent third party candidates will be running. And as a reminder, here in Pennsylvania, we're still, looking at what's going on at the Republican Senate race. But if there is not a win above the 0.5% threshold, that means the automatic recount will start, and we will not know who that nominee is until sometime during the first week of June, depending on how litigation goes. So the election, is not settled. There still is going to be some conversation. We're still counting, even here in Allegheny County, some provisional ballots. So again, just stay tuned about the election. And, talking about the election, we are joined now by one of our favorite political reporters who not only is on the election beat, but also in Harrisburg at the Capitol, knowing that you cannot always be there. And as we're working for Spotlight Pennsylvania, we're going to welcome to the program Stephen Caruso.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me, Miracle.
Thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the new position. This is the first time. I think we talked to you right before you announced it last time, and so
I think so. Yeah. No, this is definitely the first for Spotlight.
yeah. So welcome back. So like I said, we're still in elections. We're still trying to figure some stuff out. You were at the Capitol today. What are some of the things you're hearing about not only the Senate race, but also November?
Yeah. I think what's on everyone's mind right now, at least, it's mostly Republicans. The Democrats, Josh Shapiro just walked right into it, didn't have anyone on the ballot opposing him. So for Republicans, At the top of the ticket is Doug Mastriano. He's a state senator. He built his whole reputation on social media videos where he talked about his faith. He spread misinformation about the 2020 election, saying there was fraud in some cases, literally like using the wrong set of data on mail-in ballots requested from the primary to compare it to the general, and saying some more ballots were returned than requested, which is just a patent falsehood. So his whole brand is, it's almost past Trump in some ways, and he won the nomination pretty handily. So that kind of dovetailed with, I would say, this trend we've seen of just they're conservatives who want to go further than even their party leadership want to say go, which is probably sounds kind of crazy, but like even what you see from Harrisburg right now, I'd argue, is like Republicans who sort of are trying to keep their fringe in check. And now with Mastriano winning, I think that it sort of has empowered a lot of people who were looking at leadership, looking at the Republicans who control the General Assembly, and they started to think we should be going further. We should be doing more. And so what's kind of happening now is like, and I'll have more on this later in the week. I'm still working through my sources, but I think we're starting to see a pretty open amount of dissension among Republicans in Harrisburg over what direction should we go in. Like, five or almost six Republicans lost primaries, including some really senior ones, from people who are further to their right, saying that they voted for Tom Wolf's budget, that they've taken a pension, they voted for a gas tax, and all these things mean that they lost. And I'm really looking to see, like, with this sort of power vacuum opening up in Harrisburg among Republicans, who's going to fill that and who's going to like become their new voice. Doug Mastriano is going to be part of that as a gubernatorial nominee, but there could be others. So that's kind of what I'm really watching right now.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that again, because you were like in Harrisburg today, and there was a lot of goings on. You were reporting, some closed door meetings. Can you just talk a little bit about what happened today and why this is also playing into this November election rhetoric of we need to go harder, we need to be more, I guess, robust and leaning to the right and not being as partisan?
Yeah, I think that, the Republicans in Harrisburg look at what they've done. And so, like, I reported a story last year that 20% of what the General Assembly did was name bridges, 20% of the bills that passed. So these guys were paid with your taxpayer money, um, you know, and they show up, they get a pension, they get health care, they get all these benefits, and 20% of the bills that they actually got to Wolf's desk just renamed a bridge or a road for someone. I'm not even saying that to say that, like, there probably aren't people who are worthy of having bridges named after them. I'm saying that, there's a lot of issues in the world, in Pennsylvania, and everyone's everyday life that aren't being solved, from healthcare, property taxes, education, all these things that aren't being addressed. And 20% has been naming bridges. It's something that Republicans and Democrats alike could point out to me and like been frustrated with. And I think in particular, like, you can kind of disagree on what the priorities should be, but I think a lot of people on both sides are agreeing that like that's not productive. And for these Republicans, they're like, we should be doing more. We should be keeping our promises. So for them, that means passing very strict abortion laws, if not an outright ban on abortion. That means, eliminating property taxes. That means restricting spending of the state. And the reason November, then, to wind into that, is important is because whoever wins the governor's race is going to sort of either be a Republican who can work with these Republicans in the General Assembly to try and pass that agenda of those things I said: pass stricter abortion laws, looser gun laws, get rid of property taxes, lower taxes overall. Or it can be a Democrat who will most likely still be working with Republicans, but it will be, in this case, it would be Josh Shapiro, who then will be vetoing those things, or trying to cut deals, or, so the reason this election, I think, matters so much is just because, like, that election is going to decide, do Republicans get a shot to just do what they want to do, kind of have a sandbox, or are we going to continue with a split of a Democrat with a Republican General Assembly?
Thank you. And I think it's really important as people to understand that a lot of these bills that are going to be passed, not only are they being passed, to gin up the base and to get people to come out, but also because Wolf vetoes them, they have to only get passed twice in committee, get voted on, and then they are eligible to become ballot measures. So there is also this idea that November is going to be not only, you're picking your senator, your governor, and all of that, but you're also going to be voting on a lot of these ballot initiatives. And I know it's still too early, but has anybody been talking about that possibility of even if we may lose the governor's race, even if we may lose the Senate race, we'll still be able to use the backdoor ballot initiative to get some of these more uh, unpopular bills codified into law?
So yeah, that has been a tactic Republicans have used. They used it, last year, to try and get things on the ballot. I haven't heard too much yet about anything being put on the ballot for November. I think it would have to be done by like June 30th. So look, we're getting into a really busy season. A lot of stuff's gonna be flying back and forth. I think on some of this stuff, a lot of public outrage has kind of like worked in the sense of like, oh, they've called like a lot of Republicans who might vote for, say, like a big one was like changing how judges are elected, or like even like voter ID is a constitutional amendment. That's one that's been proposed. Like I think a lot of people have called their state reps and said, "Hey, don't vote for this." So it seems like Republicans have been a little gun shy on moving some of the bigger constitutional amendments since last year. But it's a possibility. The one thing I'd say too is I think they like to do it for lower turnout elections. I mean, we're going into a big midterm. I'm not saying it's going to be a presidential election, but it's bigger than how many people turn out in like the May primary of 2021. Like, how many people really end up voting then? Not too many, but in November of governor's race, a lot of people turn out, and it does seem like there's been a lining up of some of these bigger referendum with lower turnout elections.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm also going to be joined now by a wonderful co host and political director, Kahari Mosley, who's been listening in the background. But like you're talking about such a big, busy season. And our favorite season in Pennsylvania is budget season. I love it because, we love chaos sometimes. But there is a really cool, conversation about like people are lost their election? Are they going to be more willing to work, to have a good legacy as they leave to put Pennsylvania in a better position to win next year? What are some of the conversations you're seeing? We know budget season is the most contentious out of all the seasons when it comes to the Pennsylvania legislature. What is the mood in Harrisburg? What are some of the things that people are talking to you about?
Yeah, so it's weird because it could kind of go two ways. It could kind of go that all these people who have lost the election or retiring are just like, I can do whatever. I'm not facing another election. I'm kind of a free agent. I can vote however I want. I won't have any consequences for it. But you can also look at it as like, I don't have any consequences. I'm going to cause a lot of chaos. And also, like looking at the primaries, some people lost, some powerful Republicans to people who are coming at them from the right. So there might be some people kind of scared to put up a vote that could reflect poorly on them, that make them look less conservative than they claim they are. So I could see it go either way. I could see it, especially because it's an election year. No one wants to cause a big ruckus in an election year. Everyone just wants to get reelected. I could see it going, simple. I could see it becoming a whole mess. So either way, though, with that said, there is a lot of federal money out there. I think we're about 3-4 billion in the federal stimulus money. It's early. Everyone kind of has some pet priorities. Wolf always wants more education funding. Republicans usually want to not increase spending as much as they can. One thing I'm kind of keeping an eye on is there is a proposal to use some federal money for a housing grant program to help either homeowners or landlords improve their property. that's getting bipartisan support. I think it wants to use like 150 million, which is not all that much money in terms of how much federal money there is, but for a homeowner or landlord, could be a lot of money, in grants. Um, and yeah, like Democrats and Republicans are kind of getting behind this slowly. It's something I'm keeping an eye on because that's something that could easily be slipped into the budget. Um, there's been some talk amid everything. There's been some talk about lowering corporate taxes. Pennsylvania has a high corporate income tax. It's something to keep an eye on. Education funding, like I said, there's a big hole in transit funding, which is going to be a big deal for places like the Port Authority of Allegheny County. They and other transit agencies like SEPTA are going to not get money from the turnpike anymore, and that's a big hole that's going to need to be addressed. So there's a lot of really big pressing problems. And like I said, it's early. I'm just starting to get some like tips on what could be in there, but it's almost too early to tell. But those are things I'm looking at. The transit and the housing are top up there.
Thanks for that. I would be really interested in just what has the vibe been like? This is it's always interesting when session returns the week after an election. You have lame ducks.
Mhm.
You have also have folks like Summer Lee that are poised to go to higher offices. So you have this whole kind of like the first day of school, last day of school, kind of feel. So what has been the
Yeah, like, 'cause asking what has been the vibe,
Yeah.
given the election results.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Last day of school is a great way to describe it. I was walking through the Capitol on my way to somewhere, and I saw Summer Lee like surrounded by lawmakers and lobbyists and some staffers, like all congratulating her on her win, on that big congressional primary win. So like sometimes I almost feel like someone's gonna pull out a yearbook and be like, "Hey, start signing this," hags. But they still have their finals, they still have the budget to pass. So everyone's just trying to make sense of it. It was a crazy election. Some powerful people lost. Wolf's in his final term. He's going to be, for final year, he's going to be looking for, make it, build his legacy. Um, and that's kind of what makes it so hard to predict. And it's also why, it's going to be I don't want to say fun necessarily, because it's going to be chaotic and there'll probably be a lot of late nights. But from my perspective as a reporter, like, there's just a lot of digging to do in the coming 6 weeks.
So I do have a question, because I know there was some conversation. Pennsylvania, we're one of these few states that allow outside spending. We're one of the few states where, apparently you don't have to live here to, to run here. And that has always been this like bone of contention. Have you heard any conversations about any type of legislation being introduced? One, to rein in the spending, and two, to put in some residency requirements for some of these positions, given that there have been some party leadership on both sides who have
Mhm.
said that they really are not excited or ecstatic with the prospect of more people in the future just coming to Pennsylvania to run.
I haven't heard anything on residency requirements, and that I don't know if that's something the state legislature could do or not. But I know the carpetbagging is something that's funny. All you have to do is have Republicans go like off the record, and then they'd be very happy to like make fun of the fact that their top two candidates are not really Pennsylvanians. But with all that said, yeah, there has been some talk about spending. I think you said that at the top, Miracle. Like this has been a ridiculously expensive race. It's like 50 million plus in the GOP primary, 12 million to one, like actually probably like 20 million total spending, if not more, in the GOP gubernatorial. Who knows in these congressional races? What was it like 4 million spent against Summerlee? Like I just imagine like just money being shoveled into incinerator with how much people pay attention to ads these days, how many to get. So I think there has been some talk about trying to change transparency to make it easier to track some of the money. I think there's been some talk about like campaign finance limits or something that Pennsylvania doesn't have. So someone can literally write $100 million check and hand it to a gubernatorial account, and that's just illegal. That's just fine. And I think that this race could have been a wake up call. Another thing you mentioned independence. I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I'm wondering if some of the Republicans, after these losses, try to have open primaries, which is when, because right now you have to be a registered Democrat to vote or a registered Republican to vote in the party primaries. Like, and you have to be in that party. If you're a Green Party member, if you're an independent, if you're, not affiliated in any way, you can't vote in these primaries, even though, if you're in a Pittsburgh district, like that's going to be won by a Democrat. The primary is the election. So you are forced to register with a party. And I think that there might be some efforts from Republicans to try and change that in the hopes that like independent voters might sort of save their senior members from their own voters by like, moderating them. But if that goes all the way to the governor's desk, I don't know. Signs right now point to no. I think it could move through one chamber. I think it could pass the Senate. I think it goes to the House, and I think it might die there.
Very, very interesting. And I apologize for jumping in late. I had some technical difficulties
Hmm.
with my computer logging in. And I would just be also curious of, I'm sure you alluded to it earlier, but what were some of the biggest stories, particularly. I mean, we've been following the Senate race. We've been following the governor's race, but just from the state house perspective, because I know here, in Western Pennsylvania, I thought, one of the big stories of election night was, the win that Latasha Mays had
Right.
in the 24th legislative district. I don't know how many folks, in the political world, saw it coming. But taking a deeper dive, clearly the new district, really, the redistricting really impacted that race. Now around the state, did you see like other races where the redistricting itself, played a huge role? Because it looked like that was what Latasha Mays really took advantage of, was that kind of Bloomfield, Oakland, kind of the part of the district in between the Hill and Homewood that she really ran up her numbers in and really was able to take advantage of, because at that point, Martell Covington was not the incumbent. He was an incumbent in the eastern part of the district, but in the central and new western part of the district, he was not a household name because he was not the incumbent. Did you see that anywhere else around the state where the redistricting really impacted the outcome of these house elections in particular?
Yeah, in the Lehigh Valley, Pat Brown, he's one of those senior Republicans I mentioned. He's the head of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. So that's the committee that negotiates the whole budget. He's one of the most powerful people in the Capitol. And he's been like a moderate Republican. I've a lot of public education advocates I know have spoken highly of him. He's someone who's usually like, not co-signing everything Tom Wolf does, but when Tom Wolf's like, "Hey, I want more education funding," he's like, "Yeah, sure, we should do that." He represents Allentown, parts of it. And he faced a primary that was from a right wing school board member out there who accused him of being a rhino, not being conservative enough, and was backed by some money that from a conservative group that got its money from this guy named Jeff Gass. He's the richest man in Pennsylvania, and he's a huge supporter of school choice. So all alternatives to public education, charter schools, private schools, all of the above. So all this is to say, so in that race, that district got shifted a bit. And it's actually funny. Pat Brown, on the parts that were his old district, he did pretty badly. And the parts that were new to him, he actually did good. Kind of the inverse of Latasha Mays' scenario. But it's been interesting to watch. And that race is literally separated by like a dozen votes. I think they're still counting some. There'll probably be some more counted. There was a pretty important ruling that ruled that ballots that somebody submitted properly but like didn't date. So basically, it's like that it showed up on time. You like there's no smudges on it. You didn't, but you signed your name, but you didn't date it. Those ballots used to not count. Now they're going to count. Weird tangent, but all this say like so that district could go either way. It's not sure that Pat Brown's going to lose, but we saw that and I mean elsewhere in the state too. Like One of my colleagues is finishing a story on this. The goal of these maps was to try and make the General Assembly more diverse, have more Black folks, have more Latin folks, and I think we're probably going to see that. We're going to probably see more folks like that in the General Assembly, but I'm not sure if it's going to be as high as everyone thought from these new maps. So a lot of changes, but we'll still have to do some analysis to figure out if it was as much change as everyone thought.
All right. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. Hopefully next time, we won't get you in the middle of dinner. But we really appreciate you talking to us and good luck at the Capitol. I do hope, for your sake, it'll be a less contentious, budget season so you won't be stuck there, to all ends of the evening.
I appreciate it. I have a feeling I am SOL, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's hope it's not another 2009.
See you guys.
All
All
right.
right, thank you. And like we said, it's been a very busy election season, but there's been a lot of bright spots with this. We had places talk about they had turnout that was unexpected, and this was supposed to be a low turnout election. And there were even some places that were running out of ballots because more people showed up to vote than expected. And one of the reasons why is because our next guest, Kadita Kenner from the New Pennsylvania Project, has spent the better part of the last year not only registering people to vote, but motivate people to come out and participate in this election. So we want to welcome to the program Kadita Kenner.
Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And so, like I was saying, people said this election, people weren't going to come out. It wasn't going to be that big of a deal. But we're looking at some of the maps, and there was a lot more turnout, this year. How does that make you feel? Because you have been paving the ground, getting some personal attacks here and there. How does that make you feel to see those numbers first off?
Thank you for that question, Miracle. We have to celebrate the successes when we have them because they're so few and far between. And there's a lot to be said for this primary election. We're still waiting on some final results so we can get the final numbers out there. But turnout in this election is almost historical for this midterm primary. We haven't seen numbers like this in turnout in more than a decade. And I heard someone mention that we haven't had numbers since Rendell and Casey ran. So this is incredible. And, I think about the work of an organization like ours who is just trying to register the 1.7 million Pennsylvanians who are eligible to vote, but not registered in this moment. And I see the turnout numbers. I have some here. Penn Hills is an area we've spent a lot of time. And I know this is primarily a Pittsburgh office and audience. And so we spent a lot of time in Penn Hills. And I'll tell you this, in 2018, there were 4,400 votes cast, almost 4,500 votes cast in that election out of Penn Hills. It had a 21% voter turnout. In 2022, so the 4-year difference, it had 69, almost 7,000 voters turn out in Penn Hills to vote. That was 34% voter turnout. 34%. So that's a 63% increase over the same period. So if you think about the midterm from 2018 and the midterm here for 2022, a 63% voter increase. And I heard you earlier talking about, what do you attribute to this? What is this voter turnout? Well, you got some new districts that were created. And you had some interesting folks on the ballot. And when you get some interesting folks on the ballot, you might actually get people to turn out and vote. There's always this conversation about electability. Who's electable? Those who can get their folks out to the polls and cast a ballot. So really excited about the results. I mean, obviously we want 100% turnout, right? That's always the goal. But it looks like right now at this point, we're saying turnout was about 35%. So 34 to 35% of the electorate turned out. And those numbers were higher for Republicans and Democrats. Republicans turned out at about 38%, and Democrats turned out at about 31%. And we know that Pennsylvania has 500,000 plus more Democrats registered than Republicans. So definitely an opportunity for more folks to get out and vote in the general election, November 8th.
Thanks so much for joining us. I had a question. We've talked a lot in the last week, particularly about, the congressional race, Summer Lee's, historic win, Latasha May's, historic win as well. You know, but what are some other similar stories in other parts of the state that we would like our audience here in Pittsburgh to know that it wasn't just, the Summer Lees and Latasha Mays, but from the reading that I've done, this was really a statewide phenomenon when you saw in particular candidates that were, supported by Democratic Party endorsements, and things like that, not being, successful, and these more younger, progressive, candidates that didn't have the support of the party infrastructure, whether they were elected or they were unelected challengers, actually being successful, similar to how, Summer Lee and Latasha Mays overcame the party infrastructure.
It's an interesting concept when we think about folks who have to overcome the party infrastructure to get the nomination. And, it seems that there was a lot of party infrastructure this time around who couldn't get to the consensus or the 60% or whatever number they needed in order for them to actually endorse a candidate or not. But as to your question, Kari, we think about, Summer Lee, I mean, just historic. It's far too long coming. But I think about the other parts of the state that you mentioned that had similar success. I think about what's going to happen in Dauphin, Cumberland, and York County. Shemaine Daniels won that primary race against a gentleman named Rick Copeland. And so there's going to be an opportunity for a woman of color to actually be the congresswoman out of that congressional district there in the Harrisburg region. And that's just incredible. I think about the race out in Lancaster with Izzy. The gentleman there winning that election for the primary. It's a trend, right? That it's not only do you have to, buck the other party, but you also may have to buck your own party in order to win these elections. And again, it just speaks to the mobilization of these candidates and what they were able to do to get their message out there and to bring the most folks to the polls. Anyone who can do that is electable. So, I think about those races. There's there was some discussion about some men candidates taking out some of the women, particularly like in the Philadelphia districts. But again, it's still true representation out there. Philadelphia is still going to have some true representation out there. But it is interesting to see some of the various results. And again, there's still some things that we're waiting on for final numbers, but really encouraged about the way in which certain candidates have been able to mobilize their base and their supporters to show up for them and volunteer for them and bring it home.
And if I could just have a quick follow-up to that. So what do you think is it, that these candidates are doing, the party infrastructure has been doing? Because, I've been around long enough that, I remember I remember the 2002 election, Casey Rendell. I remember when the Allegheny County Democratic endorsement was pretty much, solid gold. You had that endorsement. It was pretty much game over, come March, and then the actual primary, was just an exercise in futility for whoever did not receive, the endorsement. So what do you think has changed, in the way that, people are engaged, and what has really, in many ways, they say now in Allegheny County and Philadelphia, that the endorsement does not carry the same weight that it used to 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, as an organization that's trying to register folks to vote in a way in which, we're not rocking a big D or an R on our chest, but we're just talking about the issues and trying to get people to be engaged in the political process and join the electorate based upon the issues. I think that is what those candidates did well. They talked about what they will actually do, or what they have been doing if they're current elected officials, what they will actually do when they're put into office and how they're going to serve the people. And I think that that's a testimony to the candidates, of how they were able to run their campaigns and talk about the issues. I think, as I mentioned, it's just there are people who are not in love with the D's or the R's in the moment. And so they're casting their ballots for any candidate who they believe is going to be in their best interest, who is going to help them get their needs met And I think that's what those candidates did the best of, is talking about the issues and the needs of that community and how they're going to address them. And that's what made the difference for these folks. Um, I think that the other candidates who are running in the general election in November need to take that message to heart. We can't have folks out there running against somebody else, but they need to be running for what it is they're going to do to bring about change in communities. So I think that's the biggest part. I just think it's based on those candidates and the campaigns that they ran and how they were able to communicate with their base and get their volunteers all excited and get them out there working for them. And the ground game was just incredible for those candidates who were able to pull it out.
Yeah, I know you talk about canvassing the ground game, but it was also going to be a historic election on the conservative side. Last week you had Kathy Barnett, you had Chris Fry, you had James Earl Jones, and so we're also seeing this expansion of conservative Black people running for office. Have you been able to sit down and talk with these candidates about what they're going to do with their messaging and how they're taking their messaging and reaching out? Because, like you said, there is a lot of disenfranchisement in Pennsylvania right now, and especially, with traditional voters. And we're seeing more, political parties pop up. We're also seeing expansive, of some of these traditional conservative parties. So have you been able to talk with voters about like what they're seeing, and who they're resonating with, outside of these when you're canvassing with folks?
Yeah, I think I can't say that we're engaging the more conservative folks as much, particularly because our efforts are in communities of color, and typically communities of color are not so much towards the conservative side, particularly of these current conservatives that have been running and winning. I think about Mastriano, right, and who's going to be the gubernatorial candidate for the Republican side. I mean, he had so much last minute money come out against him because you had some Republicans believing that he's unelectable. We've got some Democrats who believe he's unelectable, but we all witnessed the 2016 election, so we shouldn't believe in things like that. But I think that it speaks to, people just not being in love with either political party in this moment, or really caring about what the party says, but really what they want. And you mentioned Kathy Barnett, someone who I actually debated back in 2018, around the time when we were they were trying to put Kavanaugh on the bench. And, she also had a great ground game, where she was able to, without a lot of money, talk to so many people. And we can't discount someone like a Mastriano, who was running a campaign as if he is a progressive. He is running a heck of a ground game. And so, when you talk about, conversations that we may be having with more conservative folks, I can't say that we're having too many, just based upon who it is that we're trying to serve and who we're trying to get involved in the electorate. But I think it's consistent across both the Dems and the Republicans, is that it's not so much the party, but it's the candidate. They care about the candidate who speaks to them. And Kathy Barnett was somebody who, she had a story to tell. And people ate it up, and they loved to hear her story. So it's interesting, the final results, and to see how well she did, going up against the two men with all that money.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely the story of the last week of the campaign, was her dramatic surge, within it, as well as, with the support, from Doug Mastriano. And you could definitely say on the Republican side as well, they definitely was a lot of things happening behind the scenes to try to prevent, certain things from happening. And definitely Doug Mastriano doesn't appear to be the party's choice if the party leadership, could have, circled the wagons, so to speak. And even, I think one of the telling segments that I saw on MSNBC post the PA Senate primary was the laundry list of support that Congressman Connor Lamb had received from around the state. I think it was like 100, 150 elected officials. And I don't know if there was 24 elected officials around the state that supported John Fetterman. So I think it shows again, this disconnect between elected officials and party infrastructure and what voters are looking for in candidates. Where I feel like 20 years ago, I think, Connor Lamb wins this race, probably by the same margins that John Fetterman does. But I think that now people are looking for something different. That's not a knock, Connor Lamb, but I think just an observation, of the changing electorate and what people are looking for, out of candidates. It seems like they're looking for something different. I think 2016, really spoke to that with the election of Donald Trump as president, that people no longer want kind of the candidate, out of central casting that, would win elections in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They're looking for something that just seems different, regardless of what that difference is. And I think this cycle, has showed it again. So it's going to be interesting to see in future years, what the party infrastructures are going to do, to respond. Particularly next year, we have, very important local elections in 23, where it's Philadelphia mayor, Allegheny County executive, the two most important local positions, in the state. It's going to be interesting to see, who runs for those offices, how party infrastructures, how donors, how grassroots organizations, how progressive organizations all line up and get behind candidates. And I think, we are looking at the potential of a true sea change, next year, if the current trends continue. I think we're looking at a very, very, very historic election year come 2023. But obviously, we still have a general election this November, so we can't get too out ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we can't get ahead of ourselves, and we have to vote like everything depends on it here in 2022, because we may not have elections in 2024, depending upon the outcome of what happens. We may not have free and fair elections here in the Commonwealth in 2024 if we don't get this 2022 election right. And, shout out and congratulations to all the candidates who put themselves out there. It's hard to do. I know I'll never run for office. So, congratulations to all those who put themselves out there and ran good races and did it for the people who, those who want to be public servants. And thank you for what you're doing. The last thing I'll say, I know, because we're going to, you're going to move on to another person here now. But, I want to close it out by saying that we talk about civic education as being so important. I think about all the folks who were disenfranchised in this last election because they don't choose a political party. We're one of less than 10 states in the entire country who have closed primaries. And so I think about all the folks who could not cast a ballot in the primary and help make decisions for a political party or a candidate of their choosing based on that. And, it's hard enough. Civic engagement is hard enough. To even get people to realize the difference between the federal government and the state government, let alone trying to get them involved in party politics and run for committees and board leaders and all the other things that they may have. It's just so much education that needs to be done so that we can truly have a representative democracy and we can actually have an electorate that's really well informed. That's why so many people just stay out of the process, because they feel like they're not informed, particularly young folks, young students that we're trying to register. They don't want to register because they just don't feel as though they're informed, and they don't want to vote about what they don't know because they know how powerful the vote is and they don't want to mess it up. So that's why we need to get out here and provide the civic education, particularly for the younger folks. I look at the numbers that are coming out of Allegheny County. And, we know that only 1 in 4 high school student is actually registered to vote. Those who are able to vote on November 8th of this year, only 1 in 4 of them are actually registered in this moment. And those numbers dip to just insane numbers. When I think about McKeesport, only 5 in 100 high school students in McKeesport is registered to vote. Only 3 in 100 high school students in East Allegheny is registered to vote. Only 14 out of 100 high school students in Wilkinsburg who's eligible to vote is registered to vote. So we need to engage these students, these young folks, and get them involved so that they can get out here and make their voices heard as well. They're a large number now. They're a big number, and we need to get them engaged in this process.
Thank you so much to the amazing, Kadita Kinner. And again, I know you took a lot of hits this, past election cycle. So I really appreciate and just want to give you your flowers and just say thank you because again, the numbers don't lie, and the work really paid off. And so just again, thank you for all that you have done and all that you do.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you again to Kadita Kinner. And our final guest of the evening is a really cool rally that's going to happen tomorrow. Terrance McGeorge, again, guest of the show, founded Project Matters, works in public health, and is doing a rally tomorrow in partnership with Black Voters Matter, and really wants to have people come out. The sun's out. It's going to be a nice 60 plus degrees tomorrow. We finally got the sun in the city, so we want to welcome to the program Terrance McGeorge.
Hey y'all.
Welcome.
I just took a thank y'all. Hey Kahari, how are you? It's been a while. It's good to see you.
How you doing? Good to see you. Absolutely.
Pretty good. I'm on break at work, so I came out here to make sure that I spoke about the rally. It's just really important that I think is that late. What was that lady's name that was just on before I was? I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Kadita Kinner from the
Miss
Project.
Yeah, Miss Kinner really at the very end of the conversation, she really said something that was really important, which is the fact that youth aren't necessarily always engaged in the political process. And that's one of the big things that I wanted to talk about tomorrow is making sure that LGBT people in Pittsburgh, especially youth, people of color, doesn't matter if they're Black or Latino or whatever, but that they are engaged in the process and that they see other leaders coming out and speaking that are part of the community that just let people know, like, hey, it's really important that we engage in the civic process of, voting, of doing community work, of doing those things. It's just really important to get youth engaged. So tomorrow, we're partnering with Black Votes Matters, and I wanted to have a rally. Memorial Day is coming up, but it's also June is Pride Month. And so I wanted to do something ahead of time because there's going to be a whole lot of events, a whole lot of noise that happens when June comes. And so I wanted to just get a kickoff just to make sure that people come out, they have their voices heard. They speak about what issues impact LGBT people of color here in the city of Pittsburgh. And I just really think that it's important that we continue to highlight that, because as much as we don't talk about what's in the media or how we're affected politically, medically, just with housing, all of those things really impact marginalized people, and especially in my community. I speak to youth all the time about the price of what it costs to move out of their parents' house. And a lot of times you find out that a lot of these LGBT people, especially youth, are struggling. But even adults too, rent for a decent apartment in Pittsburgh is $1,000. And that's generous, that $1,000, and how do people who maybe not necessarily have education or have certain credentials that can get them a decent paying job, what does that look like for them? How do they survive in the city, And so that was just one of the biggest things that I wanted to just really highlight and talk about for youth here in Pittsburgh and just regular LGBT people of color. And so that's why we're doing the rally, and we're really excited to engage the community. We want to get some people registered to vote. We also want to engage people in the process of, how they can be more involved and how they can really speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves. One of the biggest things about Project Matters that we do is about advocacy. It's about, sometimes you're not going to have somebody who's going to empower you and who's going to affirm your identity and who's going to respect who you are, but it's about how you move forward. You know what I mean? How you're able to advocate for yourself, whether it's for a house, whether it's for pay, whether it's for healthcare. All of those things really impact our community. So we're really excited to talk about that tomorrow. We're actually going to leave my rally and go over to what One Hood is doing. So I'm going to try to get all the people that I have coming out to come over to you guys to support you. So I'm just really excited about what's to come for tomorrow. And we have a ton of speakers. I would love for you two to speak if you're not busy. I just really appreciate you guys for the opportunity. Tomorrow, Mellon Park, 4 to 7. Please make sure you're there.
Thank you so much. And we'll put the flyer back up one more time, so we have the flyer up so people can see. And Kari, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on, we mentioned her a bit earlier, Latasha Mays, openly, LGBTQ member of the community, very well known, on reproductive rights. But what does it mean to you to have someone, from the LGBT community elected to office, and will serve, the 24th legislative district? What does that mean to you?
So there's multiple layers to that question. The first thing is that I've known Latasha Mays for 20 years. When I was a youth and I was doing social justice work and things like that, I knew her. I've seen her progression. And just to see her where she's at in life and just the positivity and the things that she's done for the community, not just the LGBT community, but just for Black women and even Black men. She's a rare diamond, and I think that she's going to change how people look at politics, especially in this city. I think that Latasha is the perfect person that we need right now in office. And what it means for us as a community, and even for me personally, is that her campaign wasn't ran on filth. She didn't mudsling. She just really got out there, met with the people, ran a top-notch campaign, and I did everything that I could and will do everything that I can to keep her where she's at right now. And I just think it's just really historic for us. I've always wanted to go into politics, and just seeing where she's at, that makes me feel like there's a chance for me, because it's really difficult when you're a Black male, but also add that LGBT element to it. You get very nervous of what that may look like. And I feel like she just changed the game it's not necessarily about who you are, but it's about what issues you stand on and what you can bring new and innovative to politics. And so I'm just overjoyed, and I actually had the chance to meet with her the Friday before her election. We had a dinner, and she was just amazing as always. And I'm just so grateful and so happy, and it's just a joyous day. And she actually might be there tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure.
All right. I know you're at work, so I won't hope you let you enjoy the rest of your break. Please grab something to eat, get some refreshments, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you again for the opportunity. Have a great one. Bye,
You take care.
Kahori. It's good to see you. Bye, Miracle.
Always good to see you.
Bye,
Take care.
guys.
But yeah, and again, it's so cool, like here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. Like I said, a lot of historic elections are happening here. There is a movement and a moment to make sure that this is a place where everyone can thrive, everyone can run for office, and that's the whole point of a reflective democracy. But before we get to close, we did want to acknowledge that congressional candidate Jerry Dickinson did announce over the weekend that his brother passed away. And so we did want to acknowledge that post that he made and give our deepest condolences and thoughts and prayers to him and his family at this difficult time. And we know losing a sibling is something that is very tragic and heartbreaking. It's never easy. So we just want to take a moment to give him our thoughts and let him know that we are with him in this time. And I'm going to turn it over to Kahari as he closes and talks about the secondary event for tomorrow that Terrance mentioned.
Yeah, we'll be having another pop-up event at Social Status tomorrow. And that's at the corner of 5929 Penn Avenue, right at Penn Avenue in South Whitfield. Again, there's going to be food. There's going to be music. There's going to be speakers, giveaways, similar to the event that we had on the 14th, the Saturday before Election Day. And so we're partnering with Black Voters Matter. We're really excited about this. This is something we're going to be doing a lot over the summer and into the early fall as we prepare for one of the most historic general elections in the history of Pennsylvania. Now, I know every year, you say, "Oh, this is the most important election," but we know that the outcome of the November election will have huge implications for the future of Pennsylvania, the direction it's going to go, depending on who gets in office, and then also it's going to be historic in the perspective of if certain folks get elected, you have potentially Austin Davis becoming the first Black lieutenant governor. You have two African American women nominees running for Congress. So there's just a lot going on, as well as even on the Republican side, someone like Doug Mastriano, someone who was at the insurrection, someone who wants to, get rid of a woman's right to choose, unabashedly, who wants to appoint, a Secretary of State that could potentially overturn an election, on a whim, based upon, the governor or someone else's feelings about how they wish the election went. So, we have a lot going on here in the state of Pennsylvania. Folks should definitely stay tuned between now and November to really figure out who are these candidates that are running. What do they stand for, and what is the potential outcome? What are the policy implications of these various folks coming into office? And we are going to do our homework over that time, and share our thoughts, as well as, do the work that we always do to engage and mobilize people. We had the opportunity to send 50,000 text messages over the final weekend to low propensity voters in 8 counties in Western Pennsylvania, as well as nearly 20,000 people in the city of Pittsburgh. And so we know that those types of activities, are what help us get to that 36% turnout, which was, much higher than the expected 20 to 25% turnout that was predicted, by county officials as well as political pundits. So, this is going to be another historic year, which is going to be the precursor to very important local elections in 2023. So just continue to stay tuned. Read up, what you can. When we get closer to the election, we're going to do, another round of our scorecards. We appreciate all the feedback that we get, for the scorecard process, and we'll continue to try to get voters out and get folks out to the polls so they can have their voices heard. And one of the things that's going to entail with that is going to be these ongoing pop-up events that we're going to be having, where we're going to be registering voters, giving folks information, and just reminding people that the political process never ends. It's just kind of like various kind of stops on the journey. We just reached the stop last Tuesday, and now we're going to be coming to another stop in November. But right after that, again, we have local elections. We're here in Allegheny County, and a year from now, we'll be voting in primaries to decide who will the next county executive be, who will be the next county controller, who will be the next district attorney, who will be the next city controller, who will be your county council members, who will be your city council members. So, again, the process never ends. The process just goes to just a new phase, and we'll be leaving out of the federal phase and the statewide phase and going back to the local phase next year. But if this year is any indication, or last year even was any indication, that the trends of historic elections don't seem to stop. It seems like 2020, 2021, now 2022. It looks like 2023 is going to be no different. And then obviously then 2024 is right around the corner as well. So, the work never ends. Definitely want to thank Stephen Caruso, want to thank Kadita Kenner and Terrance McGeorge for joining us this evening and sharing their thoughts and sharing their insight and sharing the good work that they do, whether on the journalist side, whether on the high level strategic side or on the grassroots activism side. It all is very important in the process of having an informed, engaged electorate. And even though we kind of celebrate the fact that it was a 35% turnout, that still means that 2 out of every 3 registered voters didn't come out, which means, our work is never done. And we need to get those numbers up so more and more people can weigh in on the process. And we know part of that is because, a good, I would say, I guess about a third of the electorate is not registered Democrat or Republican. So that kind of, prevents them from participating unless there was a ballot measure or a referendum on the ballot. And this spring was not the case. But if certain political forces have their way in future elections, there will be a lot more of those ballot measures and referendums. So stay tuned to that as well. But thank you for joining us for another episode of the One Hood Power Hour. Again, thank you, Stephen Caruso, Spotlight PA, Terrance McGeorge, Project Matters, and Kadita Kenner from the New Pennsylvania Project for joining us and sharing your insight. Catch us next Monday for another episode of the One Hood Power Hour. For my colleague, Miracle Jones, this is Kahari Mosley signing off, and always shout out to producer John for making it happen.